My name is Peter Baldwin, and I'm the founder of Bird Dog Shorts. You've probably seen me on Shark Tank, where Mark Cuban obliterated my pitch. Look, Mark, I'll admit it. The invention of the first ever stretch khaki shorts that feel amazing, look amazing, and you can wear literally anywhere wasn't my best idea. But I've got more, like Dog Trader. Just like Auto Trader, but you can sell your old dog. Mark, I know you'd invest if you just gave me one more shot. So go to birddogs.com/pool and join the 2 million men who think Bird Dog shorts are a great idea. Or DM Mark Cuban and tell him to give me one more shot.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Robin. Happy belated birthday, buddy. Welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday, June 12th, 2023. I'm not going to lie, folks. I am pretty exhausted coming back from my bachelor party in Toronto, which I'll share later in the show how my first experience went visiting Toronto and why it's on the short list of possible road trip destinations that we co-host with our friends from the 108. Speaking of road trips, the White Sox embark on their West Coast road trip as they visit the Los Angeles Dodgers and Seattle Mariners this upcoming week. We'll preview that Dodgers series on this episode. But first, the Chicago White Sox. Man, they had a chance to sweep the Miami Marlins and put out a bold statement starting this very difficult June schedule 8-1. But bullpen and defensive meltdowns late cost the White Sox 2 more games as the Marlins put together back-to-back ninth-inning comebacks, and it cost the White Sox a series win. Now the White Sox are 6-3 to start June, which is still good, but we know it gets a lot tougher for the White Sox from here on out. The White Sox are now 29-38 on the season. They're still 4.5 games back of the Minnesota Twins in the American League Central. Joining me to answer my questions and what the hell happened this weekend is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com, the host of the podcast. It's Jim Margulis. And Jim, hello, sir. It's good to chat with you again.
Hello. Glad that you're back, both able to cross the border and seemingly all in one piece.
Yeah, we'll get into that later in the show. It was, I had my struggles in Toronto, to say the least. But yes, I am back. And I did get a chance to watch a lot of White Sox baseball. So this first segment, to talk about the weekend, these are the questions that I have, like, on the top of my mind. And it boils down to 3 questions. So first, let's go with a unit that has been very strong since May 1st, and that's the bullpen. And Joe Kelly looks like he ran into some trouble on Saturday. And now when the pressure gets turned up in these high leverage situations, Joe Kelly started to wilt. And then on Sunday, Keenan Middleton has been rock solid for the White Sox. And even Kendall Graveman's been rock solid for the White Sox. And both of these guys give up big innings to the Miami Marlins. Like, what happened to the bullpen over the weekend, Jim?
Well, I think the simple, boring answer is regression because, Middleton and Graveman had not allowed a run since April. So at some point, that's going to come to an end. It just happens to be very White Sox that you had them regressing in the same game a day after Joe Kelly blows a save. Like, when you look at this series, yes, the White Sox could have swept, but in game 2 on Saturday, they had a 1-0 lead in the 4th inning, and they tried to carry it all the way to the finish line. You can't reasonably expect to win that game. You have to expect some kind of failure from the pitching staff to happen along the way. So the fact that they lost that game, although I think we'll get to in a bit how they lost that game, beyond Joe Kelly, his issues, that struck me as a case like, if you only score 1 run, can't expect to win it. Painful, but on the offense. But Sunday, the way that game unfurled, with the White Sox actually adding insurance runs after 1 big inning and thinking like 5-1, this is great. It looks like the White Sox have managed to win another series as the schedule gets tougher. Good for them. And then it collapsing on them I think Jorge Soler had a hell of a series. And also I think he got into the heads of the White Sox a little bit in terms of just how they pitched him, how they game planned around him later in innings. That was something. yeah, looking at that, just like that was very White Sox. And then you had in the middle of that, it was a really busy 24 hours because you had Joe Kelly blowing the save. You had Kendall Graveman blowing the save after Middleton also gives up 2 homers. And then in the middle, you have Liam Hendricks having the elbow injury and his future being very cloudy right now. So quite a series of blows for the high leverage unit. But to me, and James Fegan wrote about this because I was trying to figure out how to write about it, except I realized I've written this post 3 times over the last year, talking about like how they spent so much on the bullpen and they didn't invest really in the lineup in the sectors of the roster that can actually build leads and kick games out of reach or give the offense give the pitching staff a chance to get right back on the horse, the big lead the next day. Like all of these leads feel so precious, and the way Rick Hahn invested in this roster by spending so much in the bullpen, not just money but time. Like I think it was like 5 acquisition periods in a row, or like 5 out of 6. He invested primarily in the bullpen. We're talking about the draft, trade deadline, offseason. Like spent so much time focusing on the bullpen and like jealously guarding every single lead they had instead of building more leads to guard. And that this is kind of the way it culminates is with having 2 games in a row that just feel like gut punches because in one game, the White Sox just could not build a lead beyond 1 run. The other game just was a typical, oh, that was ugly game. But just because it happens to be the White Sox dug such a big hole and because their offense has a hard time scoring more than 5 runs in a game and providing like real leads for a low leverage part of the bullpen to be used comfortably every once in a while. It just feels like so critical and every game demands explanations, which to go back to the boring answer, when like Middleton and Graveman were due to give up a run at some point and they just happened to do it in the same game, like that feels ugly. But when there's so many questions, you're like, man, like how could they fail? What did Pedro Grifol do wrong? What did Kendall Graveman do wrong? Like they made some mistake pitches, but just they were due to have an outing like this. And because the White Sox just have struggled so mightily to provide comfortable cushions on a even semi-regular basis, it feels like there are so many more regrets than a bullpen failure like this, even 2 days in a row, normally would generate.
As Jim mentioned, Liam Hendricks, that was the big injury news over the weekend for the White Sox. He'll have his MRI on Monday, so we'll have better certainty on just how long Liam Hendricks is going to be out for the White Sox, but it will be at least the next 15 days, so he will not be available for the White Sox until late June at the earliest. So is there any concern with the bullpen that this is going to regress back to their April performance, Jim? Because that was pretty ugly and a big reason why we're still talking about a team that's below 500.
I think you can say, like, in terms of what they did wrong, like in terms of just location, like Middleton's stuff looked fine. Graveman's stuff looked fine. Just the location was bad. And Graveman had pitched 3 out of 4 days. Kelly had been worked fairly hard, but he's been in a little bit of a rut lately. Like Kelly is the guy I think probably worries me more than anybody, just because we've seen this before. Like the fact that he can throw 100 and throw his breaking ball 92 miles per hour doesn't ensure the success you think it would from somebody who doesn't walk that many guys. Like usually the guys who can do that are guys who are walking 6 batters per 9. And you just have to hope that they don't allow hits around those walks. But Kelly is throwing enough strikes. You could probably say that he's throwing too good of strikes, except for on Saturday when he was walking guys. He's the one who worries me just because he's naturally inconsistent, and he's the reason why the White Sox were able to sign him for 2 years. Like if he were better than this, given the arm that he has, the Dodgers probably would have kept him. They would have exercised their option over him, but instead they just let him go. So he's the guy who worries me in terms of just like high leverage trust. My bigger concern is just workloads. And in James Fegan's piece about it, about the offense not providing, or maybe they're separate pieces because the games kind of blend into each other. But yeah, I think they're separate pieces because they're talking about, Joe Kelly just happened to, Anderson committed the error and Kelly had his issues getting his changeup over the plate, but also they had to nurse a 1-run lead. So those are 2 separate posts. But just talking about like the workload this bullpen has absorbed and just the number of high stress pitches. And, I'm not necessarily too worried about that right now because thanks to Keenan Middleton, you have like 5 guys who Grifal's been able to rotate through when it comes to 7th, 8th, 9th innings. It's not always the same 7, 8, 9, push button formula. So he is able to defray the impact of all these high leverage games a little bit, but still, when they're talking about like soreness and they're talking about like how they just had to pitch through it, their job is to pitch, like it's still the first half of the season. That's usually like August talk or when guys are hurt and when guys have to step up. I mean, like Liam Hendricks, he might be the one who's hurt right now, but he was not a big part of the plans anyway. You're hoping, crossing your fingers, that he could become a high leverage guy again so soon after everything he went through. But to me, that was always like, maybe not, just short of wishful thinking, but definitely like an 80th, 90th percentile outcome, hoping that Liam Hendricks could somehow be like a 9th inning guy again for most of a season. So like, that's really my concern, is just like, you're talking about soreness an awful lot. And because the offense is not providing runs and they're, Braxton Garrett is cutting them down. They no longer have like lefties to beat up on when it comes to just like, oh, here's a good chance for a win, or here's a good chance for 6 runs in a game. Like those games are not presenting themselves the way that they have in previous years. So, just the lack of offense makes me think like if the bullpen's sore now, I don't think their workload is going to lighten up any. So you really have to hope that, this recent stretch from Aaron Bummer, where he's been decent, like that he can continue and take some of those 7th and 8th innings away from, Kelly and Graveman and Middleton, and maybe Garrett Crochet, if he can get past the post Tommy John surgery command issues guys usually have. Like that's another guy who can maybe step up and absorb some of these innings. But really, that's what you're looking at. Like the hope is not, as long as Eloy Jimenez can't be counted on to like play more than 10 games in a row, or, whatever he runs into and his leg barks on him again. Like that's what we're looking at, is just, how can we try to figure out like how the White Sox are going to spread all these innings around, these high leverage innings around, to make 4, 5 runs hold up, if that.
You talked about Tim Anderson. I saw the highlight, a term I use loosely. I saw the video clip.
It was for the Marlins. It was a highlight for the Marlins. It's all relative.
Yeah. I saw the video clip. Just, again, fundamentally poor. This is the 3rd type of play that Anderson has had over the course of the month, and he has failed in this type of play. He has made good defensive plays, cutting down runners at home plate. I don't know what it is about extreme high leverage situations. This particular issue, infield pulled in, 8th or 9th inning, Anderson can't make the play. What the hell has happened to Tim Anderson, Jim?
Well, I think the simple issue, or a documentable one, is that, the knee doesn't seem entirely 100%. Either that or the knee is fine, but bad habits were formed while he was playing through some, knee issues to where like he can't really pull the ball in the air, but he also can't hit the opposite field for power. Like his base is not providing him the kind of opposite field impact and mistake or the ability to drive mistakes to the left field the way it did before. Like his hard hit balls to the left side are pretty much all to the shortstop, and some of them turn into double plays, which isn't good. Then in the field, you just have, like you said, he's never been the most fundamentally sound shortstop. Like when he's healthy, and like last year he had the groin issue and that hurt him defensively. But like when he's been fully functional, he's been okay, maybe slightly below average, maybe slightly above average, depending on whether you value like errors or range, more in terms of how you value shortstop play. I can see the argument for both, like not necessarily raw fielding percentage, but just when it comes to, I like my shortstop to make the plays pitchers really count on them making, versus like, I like my shortstop to cover ground. If they make mistakes in between, so be it. Like I can see both sides of that, but I think it washes out to be like average, maybe slightly below average. And that's playable when he's winning batting titles. But right now, like, I don't quite know beyond the knee injury, like why he's regressing. I think, they're, yeah, Twitter, I guess, has invited some room for speculation, which makes me uncomfortable in terms of just like distractions and such. Like,
you talk about off the field stuff?
Off the field stuff. Like, just like, I don't, distractions. Like, let's just throw that out there just to, if people are like talking to the podcast saying, well, what about that? Like, there, acknowledge it. Like, I don't know. It's that's all I'll say about it is I don't know. But just the way his game has changed, battling both the groin injury last year and then the knee injury. I just wonder if it's bad habits coming to the fore, playing in a compromised fashion for most of the last year, calendar year, from May to May or June to June. Like, he's played with one thing or another, and he's not playing like somebody who looked like you could count on him to do certain things. Like last year, when he was batting 300, like you could count on him to get the ball in the air, even if it was to right center and right field, but it was solid contact. Like, the solid contact's not there. The other thing I wonder too is he went to Driveline in the offseason just to try to make himself, I think, more structurally sound in terms of being able to drive the ball, and maybe, who knows, maybe to try to get past some of the bad habits he'd formed when playing with the groin issue, and losing his power, maybe trying to rediscover the pop. Maybe he's just searching for himself, and maybe the talk of the money that we've talked about in the offseason, when you were talking about Tim Anderson contract extensions, what it would be, and what shortstops are getting paid, and I brought up the point Dansby Swanson, he shouldn't get Dansby Swanson money, or at least Dansby Swanson contract, just because the durability hasn't been there. And so who knows, maybe he, that's adding some pressure to make himself a more impactful shortstop to get that kind of contract. And all that work is snowballing on him in the wrong direction. He can't quite find his keys. This is all random speculation, but just he does look like he's, it's more than physical, but I don't necessarily want to discount, even though we've been talking about this for such a long time that it feels like he should have gotten past it by now. I wouldn't discount that he is still playing through some leg issues that rob him of his base.
There are 20 shortstops in Major League Baseball that have 200 plate appearances, and this is coming from Fangraphs. Tim Anderson ranks 17th out of those 20 shortstops in WAR, with a total of 0.1. Only C.J. Abrams, who's been splitting time at second and short for the Washington Nationals, Ahmed Rosario, which everyone in Cleveland wants to kick out, and Enrique Hernandez of the Boston Red Sox. And Hernandez plays all over the field. He's currently at negative 0.5 WAR. I'm not quite sure what has happened to him, and Rosario's at negative 0.4. Javier Baez is at 0.2, and Javier Baez has got a 61 weighted runs created plus. So Tim Anderson is nowhere near being a top 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball. And offensively, his 71 weighted runs created plus out of these 20 shortstops ranks 18th. Only Anthony Volpe, the rookie for the Yankees, who's going through his rookie struggles, and Javier Baez has a worst weighted runs created plus. You cannot be this bad defensively and not hit and be a dependable core piece. This is where, and the quotes from Pedro Grifol, I'm going to have a mini rant here. His latest quote about Tim Anderson, about how hard Tim Anderson works and what he is seeing in the preparation for Tim Anderson, believing Tim Anderson will break out, and that is why Tim Anderson is going to be the leadoff hitter for the White Sox. That is the same stuff that Tony La Russa would say. There is no difference between how Tony La Russa would think about an individual player. Maybe La Russa is a little bit more combative in his response than Pedro Grifol, but it's the same line of thinking here. And I'm sorry, it's laughable. You cannot have your leadoff hitter have a weighted runs created plus of 71. He's 29% below league average. He gets on base at a 300 clip. That's not a leadoff hitter. What are we doing? Where's the logic here?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's thinking about like Kendall Graveman and Keenan Middleton giving up their first runs in the same game and it feeling extra painful. It reminds me of like Tim Anderson and Andrew Benintendi being like there are three regulars now without a homer. Miles Straw's the other one. The White Sox have Tim Anderson, Andrew Benintendi. Oftentimes they're batting 1 and 2. So the White Sox, find ways to compound problems and make it twice as difficult on themselves, except like when it comes to Graveman and Middleton, that's slightly random. That's just, bad luck and baseball players being human. But when you're writing out a lineup card, that's choice. Mm-hmm. And, to go back to the idea of like faith in a player and how hard he works, like, yeah, but the results aren't there. And, when Anderson came back from injury and we talked about like, this is the time to knock him down the lineup, because it wouldn't be disrespect to say like, he's trying to work his way back. We need him in the lineup. We know he's not 100%. We just want whatever he can give to us. And if it comes in the 7th spot, great. And if he is able to prove that he's all the way back, then we'll bump him up. But right now we just want his bat and in there because it's the best option we have. Like, they didn't do it then. And the further he gets away from that injured list stint, like, the harder that line is to sell. So now you just make it more uncomfortable. Like, they had an opportunity to make it a comfortable conversation or like a defensible conversation saying like, oh, he's hurt right now. We're easing him back in. But because they missed that off ramp with him on the leadoff spot, now it becomes like a demotion. And that's, I think, one thing that Grifol really seems to want to avoid is sending that kind of disrespect. And just he did sit him on Sunday after the error, but he said like it was just to get him 2 days off in a row, even though there's a lefty on the mound. I thought that was strange, like picking that day to have him take off. Like, you figure like maybe the opening game of the Dodgers would be the better way to do it. Like, day off after an off day. That's 2 days in a row. It is strange to me just how Grifol is handling it or not handling it. Like, it reminds me a little bit of like Robin Ventura, just like conflict aversion, just not making difficult choices and just things snowballing. We saw Ventura do that during his tenure. So yeah, that's, first time managers, I think, can sometimes have this issue.
In the last calendar year, from June 11, 2022 to June 11, 2023, Tim Anderson has played 85 games and has had 378 plate appearances. A lot of injuries. We've talked about that. In his last 85 games, Tim Anderson is hitting .256 with a .294 on base percentage and is slugging .301. Folks, that's a .595 OPS. In Tim Anderson's last 85 games with the White Sox, his weighted runs created plus is 68, which is lower than his current season value of 71. This is not new. It's a continuation of what happened from last year. I'm shocked because Tim Anderson was who I thought was going to have a tremendous offensive season. I thought, hey, bombs equal bags. We're going to see the Tim Anderson that we saw in 2019, 2020. He's going to pull the ball in the air. He's going to hit 20 home runs this year. He's going to hit over 300. He's going to be an all-star for the White Sox. No. And people are putting out mock trades involving Tim Anderson. Nobody wants this version of Tim Anderson.
Yeah, it's confusing me too.
I don't even know if the White Sox want this version of Tim Anderson. We're going to have a serious conversation if it's even worthwhile picking up the $14.5 million option on Tim Anderson if the White Sox don't think they're going to be winning in 2024.
Yeah.
God, this has gone super south real fast. And I don't know what it's going to take. Yeah. I don't know what it's going to take.
With that option conversation, it is depressing, but it's one I'm just holding off till August or September. Like, the way he looks at the end of the year will determine just what the White Sox choose to do or how much trade value might have if he's still on the White Sox at that point. So right now, like, yeah, if he continued this form to where he goes homerless and his OPS OPS plus begins with a 7 because he's just that far below league average. Yeah, that is a case where probably not, unless like the White Sox are just like going to be shedding so much money otherwise in the payroll that they may as well hold on to him and see if there's any trade value next time around, and just, more or less shrug their shoulders at contending, really pushing to contend in 2024. But yeah, it is an uncomfortable discussion, but I think the more immediate question is like, does he have trade value? Even though it is a pretty barren market for middle infielders, to where like that's what kind of like the AL Central. The reason why I think the White Sox might still contend is because the AL Central is so bad. Like the reason I think Tim Anderson might have some trade value is because there don't seem to be a lot of middle infield options out there for a team. So if one team acquires a shortstop, like, and another team needs one, he might be the best one remaining. So that's kind of why I still think there might be. But right now it's like, it's hard to sell. Like, Dodgers need a shortstop. Yeah, but is Tim Anderson a shortstop they want? Or do they feel like the Dodgers standards for play, like the White Sox standards are one thing, the Dodgers standards are another. Like, do they think like, trading for Tim Anderson to play shortstop is something they want to do at this point? Like, that's right now, no, because if he's not healthy, like then he's, if that's the leading answer why he's not producing, then like, why would they get excited for trading for damaged goods? So that's kind of what you have to discuss when it comes to his current form. And so like, I'm kind of holding off on all these trade value questions, who you might want him, what the White Sox might be able to get back from him until basically like early July, just because like right now it doesn't seem like he's rounding the corner into better form, or even like that better form is on the horizon anywhere. Like, I don't know, this could be a long lasting thing because there just really aren't any signs of life.
Well, with Tim Anderson struggling as much as he has, that obviously impacts the offense and why the offense is sputtering again. In its last 4 games, the White Sox have only scored 8 runs. That's not going to cut it. And 5 of those came on Sunday. And I think I know the answer why this White Sox offense is sputtering. The White Sox have had 17 batters for them this season that have had at least 10 plate appearances. So I'm also including the backups that have had brief opportunities. Out of the 17 players that have had at least 10 plate appearances for the White Sox in 2023, only 5 of them, Jim, have a weighted runs created plus over 100. You want to guess who the 5 players are?
Let's see. So Luis Robert.
1.
Obviously. Jake Berger.
2.
Eloy.
3.
Vaughn is probably close.
4.
Maybe Grandal.
5. You got them all.
Okay, all right.
Great job.
Like Grandal has that homer helped him out because he was starting to dip, and then like that homer helped his numbers quite a bit.
In order, Jake Berger leads the team with a 136 weighted runs created plus. Luis Robert is second at 123. Andrew Vaughn's actually at 111. Yasmani Grandal is at 107, and Eloy is currently at 105. Clint Frazier's next to the list at 95, and Andrew Benintendi, the largest free agent contract signing in White Sox history, is currently at 90. When you've had 17 players have at least 10 plate appearances for you in a season, and only 5 have a weighted runs created plus above league average, Jim, I think that's a good indication why this offense is sputtering. Any other ideas?
And, well, I mean, like, and though of those players who are over 100, like, at least a couple of them, like Berger and Roberts, they're getting there basically all on slug. They're not getting there on walks or like sterling on base percentages. So, when you have that kind of performance, like the guys who are like barely clearing that bar, like Grandal and Vaughn, they're able to walk some, but they're also like really slow, like among the slowest players in baseball. So like their walks don't help as much as walks for like Tim Anderson or Yoan Moncada might, guys who can go from first to third, second to home, first to home, steal an occasional base. Like they don't do that. So their walks don't necessarily help. And then the guys who like, might be able to run a bit, like aren't walking or either that or aren't hitting, like Moncada, like, his offense is basically dried up since he's come back, like struck out 4 times again. His swing looks really painful when he's swinging righty. Like it's like not all there's like one catch-all explanation. It's just that the pieces don't fit. Like there are a lot of samey players and the guys that they brought in to do other things, like in case like Grandal, like he draws walks. Andrew Vaughn, he's got discipline, but their secondary skills are not quite there. Like they're not hitting for elite power. They're not playing, elite defense. They're not, contributing meaningfully in other regards to really help that profile, give the boost. Like as much as they bring to the table, they take some stuff off it. And so like the pieces just don't fit the way that the on paper talent, the brand name talent on the roster suggests that they should. So yeah. And then like, Yohan Moncada, I was thinking about it when we were talking about the Twins and how the Twins offense has really struggled. And like guys like Max Kepler have bottomed out. And like Moncada, he was one of those 2019 guys, career year in 2019. Like, is that the case where like they just, they bought high on him? COVID plays a part in that's obviously there. And the effects probably lingered a while for him. And like, you have to, say that's bad luck, but also like it could be a case where just, he happened to be showing his best at a time where the offensive conditions were most favorable for somebody like him. And even if COVID didn't happen, he might've still been in for a dip. So that's kind of my latest thought with Yohan Moncada is like, even if he did get all the way back, like what's all the way back now, having seen the Twins and that 2019 team, having been proven to, maybe not be fraudulent. That's too strong of a word because like it did happen, but it's a case where like just the conditions made them look so much better than they actually are.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't even know anymore with Moncada. It's so depressing just looking at the White Sox offensive numbers. And, you want to believe, and you look at the American League standings and everyone's right. You can't count out the White Sox because they're still in this thing, even though they're closer to leading the American League Central than they are to being 500, which is ridiculous to say out loud. But these offensive numbers are ugly. Gavin Sheets has stopped hitting for the White Sox. I mean, he's hitting 228 with a 301 on base percentage, slugging 397. Like, there's no point in playing Gavin Sheets if this is the type of offensive player that he's going to be. Romy's starting to hit better, but by saying he's starting to hit better, he's hitting 198 with a 213 on base percentage. It's slugging 384. That's not good. We already talked about Tim Anderson. There's been problems at second base. Luis Robert and Jake Berger are the only hitters in this lineup on pace to hit more than 30 home runs this year, but Robert is only on pace to drive in 77 RBIs. Vaughn's on pace to hit 19 homers and drive in 97 RBIs. So for those that like the old school stats, that may look pretty, but he's hitting 244, which if you're an old school guy, you'll look at that and say, that's not very good. Yeah, it's just up and down, man. And the technology is there. You have new coaches. You have multiple coaches helping on the offensive front. This just might be a talent issue. Like, I'm sorry, this collection of position players is just not good. And I don't know if they're going to be good enough to help the White Sox pull off this miracle and try to win the American League Central in 2023. I'm going to be a meatball for a moment.
Okay.
Every time Pedro Grifol puts out everything is awesome, I'm being as positive as I can be to the media, I am hoping it is like the reverse when he's in the clubhouse. Because honestly, these position players need a kick in the ass. Like, we've been talking about this whole group for years, Jim. Like, what happened from 2020 to now? That should have carried over. Like, do you have such serious injuries that you just completely lost the art of hitting? Like, I just don't get it. I don't get it on how it has gone so bad.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to 2020, what happened between them and now is like they didn't add anybody between 2020 and now. When you look at the lineup, like everybody there was basically around, aside from Andrew Benintendi, who replaced Jose Abreu in terms of payroll commitment, trying to boost the offense through that. Like, Andrew Vaughn replaced Abreu on the diamond. Benintendi replaced Abreu on the payroll. Otherwise, like, Grandal, like fourth year of a contract for a catcher in his mid-30s. Like, you expect him to kind of fade out and replace him with more interesting talent. Like, Andrews wasn't necessarily supposed to be around in 2020, but they had guys like him, like Cesar Hernandez. Like Andrews is the new Cesar Hernandez. Like that's kind of it. Anderson, Moncada, Robert, Jimenez, like they're all there. So they didn't add anybody interesting and new and young. And like Marcus Semien, like go back to him, like, when he was a free agent, and it was a pipe dream, but also like it doesn't hurt to articulate pipe dreams, just because like sometimes things shouldn't be pipe dreams with the White Sox, especially if you can create a compelling argument for it. In a case like Marcus Semien, like, yeah, he plays second base and maybe he's a better shortstop than Anderson, but like he's good and young and durable, and he makes an impact in one of the most important positions, whether it's second base or shortstop. Like he helps solidify the middle infield. He can do a bunch of different things, and he had a rough transition to Texas, but basically over his last year and a half, like he's been among the best players in baseball. And the Rangers paid to have one of the best players in baseball, and they're getting what they paid for. And the White Sox, like, they've gotten what they paid for. Like very concerned, like the top of the market guys they signed were top of the market for catchers, which is always depressed. Top of the market for closers, which is always depressed compared to like top of the market for second basemen or right fielders, or, guys who can play every day or start 30 games. Like just, they did not add meaningfully. And so like between 2020 and now, like they just did nothing to shore it up. They counted on the talent that they had on hand being there. And despite like all the warning signs that like this thing might not quite, this thing might be running out of steam when it comes to the original core, like they did not really heed those signs at all.
Marcus Semien, by the way, there are 7 position players according to Fangraphs that are already worth 3 wins above replacement, and Marcus Semien is one of those. He's got a 3 WAR to the season, a 135 weighted runs created plus, along with his 9 home runs and 50 RBIs. He's walking 9.5% of the time. He's striking out 15.2% of the time. Yeah, he's a star.
Plays good defense, can't knock him out of the lineup. Like plays every day.
Yeah, and he was with the White Sox. All right, so that's the weekend. And shockingly, the White Sox are still only 4.5 games back of the Minnesota Twins in the American League Central, so you can't count them out yet. But we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Toronto and how my trip was in Toronto and visiting the Rogers Center and the city itself. And I also got a chance to watch those American League Central leading Twins. So that's what we'll talk about next after a quick word from our sponsor. I'm sure many of you had this debate with significant others and friends about how fashionable cargo shorts are. As someone who has fought these battles and has been willing to die on the hill about the benefits of cargo shorts, I found a new light. In my attempts to get into more shape, I've lost a couple of pants short sizes, so it was time for a new wardrobe fix, and I discovered an apparel company called Bird Dogs. They make a wide range of gear, but they get high marks for their shorts. After receiving a pair, I understand the hype. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts have a slimmer fit, so it's more in line with today's fashion trends. It gives legs a sculpted look, but it's still a great fit around the waist, so I don't feel constricted. That's because Bird Dog shorts are not made with stiff, restricted cotton. Bird Dogs invented a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but it stretches to get you a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement, which is key for me. I want to look fashionable, but in a practical way. It's going to get hot in Chicago, I promise you. And if you are like me, wanting to up your shorts game, check out Bird Dogs. Right now, they're running a special. When you make your order at birddogs.com, use promo code POOL at checkout to receive a free Yeti-style tumbler. Again, the URL is birddogs.com/pool. Use promo code POOL at checkout for that gift. Welcome back to the Sox Machine Podcast. All right, like I said in the intro, I went to Toronto for my bachelor party, and a lot of people have been asking, Josh, why Toronto? Well, a big reason why is that after watching very loud and exciting crowds for Blue Jays fans in Toronto, I wanted that experience. And yeah, I want to visit every major league ballpark, but Toronto was definitely on the short list, on my wish list, to go see a game there. And I got a chance to watch the Saturday game. It was beautiful weather, 75 degrees. It was sunny. They open up the roof, which is a much different experience when the roof is closed at the Rogers Center. And Jim, have you been to Toronto? Have you seen a game at Toronto?
Yes, probably about 15 years ago or so.
Okay.
So it's been a while, but I remember it. The thing I remember most is it being the cleanest park I'd ever been to.
Still is. It's like Disney. That's how clean it is.
Yeah.
For anyone that's ever been to Disney World, there is constant staff cleaning in the stadium. It's impressive. It is a very clean stadium. The drawback, though, one, the seats are very narrow, Jim. And there are no cup holders. We had good seats. No cup holders. That made things difficult. But the ballpark was very nice. They redid that whole outfield section where they raised the bullpens. They moved in the fence. And they have put in very large bars, much larger than what the White Sox have done. In the outfield quarters on the 100 level, and then all the way in the 500 level, they have this big bar as well. I believe Corona sponsors that bar. But it's a great sight line. You go, grab yourself a drink, and then you turn around, and you got a great view of the ballpark, like a standing room only. And if you just want to hang out with people and drink pretty good beer, or if you like cocktails, it's a full bar there. That's a great standing room option to watch a game in Toronto. I wouldn't mind just doing that next time. It kind of like Colorado. Coors Field has that big bar high up. Like, you could just hang out there. Don't even
Nationals
go to your
Park
seat.
has that too.
Be at the bar.
Yeah.
Oh, do they? Okay. That's one aspect that I really like. And I don't know if that's what the White Sox are intending to do at the Miller Lite Landing, but it's not hitting at the same level because they only really serve beer and seltzers in that train car. It's not a full-scale bar. If that's what the White Sox are intending to do, what other stadiums are doing, it's falling a bit short. It's falling a bit flat there. But the Rogers Center, next time I go, I probably would just want to watch a game there and just chill and hang out with everyone. And as I'm not a fan of the Blue Jays, but I am a big fan now of the city of Toronto. For those that say that Toronto reminds them of Chicago, very much so, how the city operates. So it felt like a home away from home. And that's why, I was with our friends from the 108, Beef Loaf, Chirizi by Sox Summer, and I told them during the trip, Jim, Toronto will be on the short list of upcoming road trips because one of the currency exchange right now, it's the one American dollar equals $1.25 in Canada. So think of everything as 25% off from U.S. pricing. Direct flights from both Midway and Chicago Airport. So for the White Sox fans that live in Chicago, whether you're on the north side or the south side, both Midway and O'Hare have direct flights to Toronto. And it's just a great walking city. You don't need a car, and there's just so many options, especially if you like beer or bourbon. Food options are just crazy. Like, they got 17 places that you can get a cheeseburger from. You got Tim Hortons if you love Indian food, Chinese food, other ethnic food. Like,
sorry, I thought you said they have Tim Hortons if you love Indian food. Like, that's how I heard that. It's like, wow, that's different from how I remember it.
Sorry, Tim Hortons does not have Indian food.
Tim Hortons,
yeah. Thank you for that. But yeah, so that's why it's on the short list. So for those that are like looking ahead, and again, we'll look at the schedule. That's how impressed I was with Toronto and the Rogers Center. It's definitely on the short list that we could have an international road trip to Toronto, Canada, in the near future. And I would be really excited to put that together, Jim.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed my time at Toronto.
Yeah, I would like to go back because I remember being slightly disappointed, but only because I went to Montreal first among Canadian cities, and that felt like so different. I've spoken of my love of Montreal many times, but it just felt like I drove 3 hours across the border, and I was in like Europe with training wheels is how Montreal felt. And having not been to Europe at that point, like, this is mind blowing. Just, everything's in a different language. People are speaking a different language. I'm just sitting here listening to it, don't understand what's going on. This is good for me as a person. And I went to Toronto and it felt very Chicago-like. It's like, oh, I know this. This kind of, this feels familiar. And so like I was slightly disappointed, which is unfair to Toronto because like it's its own city. And so I would like to go back, and now that I know what it's like and get past that, like I do want to go exploring more. Also, like when I went, getting newspaper salary, I had no money. I have a little bit more money now. I can have more of a fun time there, go to better restaurants than I did when I was there. So I was just kind of getting by when I went there the first time. So I think I could probably do it more thoughtfully, put a little bit more planning into it, and have more of a time than I did when I went 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny because I ran into someone who was from Ottawa, and they made the same point that you did, because they found out that was my first time visiting Canada, and they're like, okay, so when are you going to go to Montreal? Because Montreal is better than Toronto. And I said, soon. I was supposed to go for one of our dudes trips, but then the pandemic happened. COVID happened in 2020, and that canceled that trek to Montreal, and we haven't rescheduled that trek yet to go revisit Montreal. But a lot of people would agree with you. Canadians would agree with you, Jim, that Montreal is more fun to visit than Toronto. But that does not mean that Toronto is not a good place to visit. It is a good place to visit. And we will be hosting a road trip there soon. Will it happen in 2024? Probably not, if we get our wish list that Kansas City gets a weekend. But in 2025 and beyond, just keep an eye out. We may be picking Toronto soon. As far
get
as
your
a road
passport.
trip. Yes, get your passport.
You should have one anyway. But if you don't, or if it needs to be updated in the near future, get on that.
Yes, I have to renew mine for next year. Global entry as well, very helpful. Yes, so Toronto is awesome. Now, being there, the Blue Jays faced the Minnesota Twins, and I was at the Saturday game. And Jim, that Saturday game reminded me of the April White Sox games. The Blue Jays are up 3-0 after 6 innings, and then they proceed to lose 9-4.
Yep.
Adam Simber, man, the Blue Jays just let him die on the vine. Just give it up hit after hit, and then the big grand slam to Carlos Correa. And watching the Twins not face the White Sox in person, I have to say, when Joe Ryan is on the mound, the run prevention side, that is still a very solid team. I don't know about their offense.
They don't know.
But and they don't know. But when we constantly have these conversations and bring up these points that, well, you can't count out the White Sox because there's still 4.5 games back of the Minnesota Twins. That's within reach. The Twins have been pretty consistent in the run prevention side. And they did win that series in Toronto. And boy, the White Sox weren't even close to winning a game against the Blue Jays in Toronto in April. The Twins are probably a 500 team because their offense is sputtering. But if 500 is going to win the American League Central, I think what's going to make it tough for the White Sox to catch the Twins is that I think the Twins are just better on the run prevention side. They're better on defense, and the pitching has been performing better than the White Sox. Disregard what you think of the talent level. What the Twins are getting out of production from their pitching, Jim, is better than what the White Sox have. And it's a thought in my head of, is this enough for them to outlast Cleveland and the White Sox? But now I see Cleveland. Shane Bieber had a big start against the Houston Astros. Tristan McKenzie is back for the Cleveland Guardians. Like, all these offenses are bad. So if all the offenses are bad, who's going to pitch the best? And that might be the end result of who wins the American League Central. And the Twins are continuing to pitch well.
Yeah, my concern with the Twins is just like they've had health problems. They've had problems like guys holding up for 150 innings. So that's my big question for them, is whether they can, by August, when the workloads are starting to pile up, will they still be sharp? Because we've seen Sonny Gray have fades. We've seen Joe Ryan be limited in terms of like how deep he goes in the game. So I'm curious, like they've pitched better and they've answered those questions better early than I thought, because especially since Tyler Mahley's out and such, and Kenta Maeda didn't have the smooth return that they thought. Like I thought they might have already had the obstacles that knocked them off course, and they've been more resilient than I thought. So like I have more of an open mind than I think I did before the season in terms of like how good their pitching can be. I'm kind of fascinated by the Blue Jays just because like I keep seeing John Schneider in my trending topics, and I don't follow many Blue Jays people. So like just the amount of pressure he's under is fascinating to me. Just watching Charlie Montoyo in the dugout, like he did give them what they needed over Montoyo last year, but like, is he any good as a manager? Like when it comes to just helping, when he's the guy to blame versus the guy who is cleaning up the mess when somebody else is blamed. That's kind of a fascinating subplot to the whole thing to me, because I had the Blue Jays, I think, winning the American League. I had in preseason predictions, I had the Braves beating them in the World Series, but I expected more from the Blue Jays. But yeah, a lot of John Schneider complaining that I see, and I don't think I normally would based on just, I follow a Blue Jays writer just to have some semblance of the news. But man, the complaints are very loud.
Right. Being in the stands during that bullpen meltdown, it was, here we go again. That was the reaction. Like, Blue Jays fans don't like the bullpen. At least the Blue Jays fans that were sitting by me in the section 116 is where we were sitting. Like, it was one of those, yep, another bullpen meltdown again. Can't hold the lead. And I didn't know if it was that common of an occurrence, and maybe I'm just out of town stupid, but I also don't think it helps that Vlad Guerrero Jr. is not having the type of season that we would expect him to have, and he's batting cleanup right now, and they were having Brandon Belt batting third. Matt Chapman's been great for them. Bo Bichette's been outstanding for the Toronto Blue Jays this season. And George Springer can be a difference maker when he is in the lineup and when he can stay healthy enough to play. They're just not hitting on all cylinders, but, we're talking about the Blue Jays. They're like, well, are the Blue Jays at 500? The Blue Jays are at 37-30. Like, they would be leading the American League Central by like 4 games.
It's all relative.
It's just that in the American League East, they're 10.5 games back of Tampa Bay. And they are the team right now that's a half game back of the wild card. So the Blue Jays are the team right now that won't go to the playoffs of the American League, because the American League Central Division winner is going to get the 3rd seed, and they're going to have a record worse than the Blue Jays. Like, if anyone's going to scream fan base wise about how this is unfair, the playoff format, it might be the Blue Jays at the end of the season. As they're currently, slightly ahead of the Angels. The Angels are 36-30, but the Blue Jays right now are half game back of Houston, which the Astros are 37-29. So I think that drum beat's going to get louder and louder.
They'd have more of a right to complain if they beat the Twins in the series.
Well, at home,
yep,
right?
So they forfeited their right to complain about the AL Central winner.
Right. And they're really struggling in the American League East. Like, they have a poor record against their division foes right now. So, yeah, the Blue Jays are not hitting on all cylinders, but when watching the Twins, again, offensively, I'm not intimidated. No one should be intimidated by the Twins offense. It's not that good. And I say this watching them score 9 runs in that game. I just think it was really bad pitching out of the Blue Jays bullpen. A couple of big home runs really made that a lopsided affair. But the run prevention side, I think we all have to respect what the Twins are doing. And as long as the Twins continue to be this good on the run prevention side, I think they could wade around 500. And let's see what they do before the trade deadline, if they make any moves to help boost their offense, or if they get healthier, having Byron Buxton and maybe Joey Gallo back in the lineup. Like, I just don't see the Twins buckling enough where they have like a 9-game losing streak like the Detroit Tigers are going through right now.
Yeah, the Tigers and Royals are just, I think they're done. I mean, the Royals have been done since April, but just the Tigers, just too many injuries. They're buckling. But now the Twins I was waiting for it because they had a decent enough April to front load their stats a little bit, but now every AL Central offense is bottom 10.
Yeah.
OPS, Twins are 21st, White Sox are 26th, Guardians are 27th, Royals are 28th, Tigers are 30th.
The Tigers have a worse offense than the A's?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
In terms of OPS, yes.
Oh, that's bad. That is bad. Well, Toronto was not bad. I enjoyed it. So, quick recap. Toronto's a great city. Go visit. We'll have a road trip that we'll co-host with our friends from the 108 in Toronto in the next couple of years. So, get your passports ready. And, it'd be great to see everyone in Canada in the next couple of years when we do host that road trip in Toronto. But coming up after another quick word from our sponsor, we will be previewing the White Sox road trip as they head out west. First, they're going to be visiting the Dodgers in Los Angeles. We'll talk about that series next. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful, and Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater shows near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. And we all know buying tickets today to events, man, it can be a very frustrating experience, especially if you're trying to go to big events, waiting in line, and the queue is for hours at a time, or your spot on the line is like 20,000, and it just doesn't seem like you're to be able to get tickets for these big time events. But Game Time is the place for last minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. They also have exclusive flash deals on tickets for all the sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, theater, and much more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's a big part of why they're the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. And they also have images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone. You never have to dig through your email to find the tickets. So you can snag tickets without stress on Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first purchase, and use it for the upcoming White Sox homestand. Some big games for the White Sox. The Texas Rangers are coming into town next week. The Boston Red Sox in the weekend series. Definitely use Game Time to buy tickets for those games. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, the White Sox go on a West Coast road trip. They got 2 of them actually this month. The first one is visiting the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Seattle Mariners. The second one, they'll be visiting the Los Angeles Angels in Anaheim and then Oakland a couple weeks from now. But this Dodgers team suddenly is looking at the Arizona Diamondbacks leading the National League West. Yes, the Diamondbacks have 40 wins. The Dodgers come into this series 37-29. They're 3.5 games back of the D-backs in the National League West. The Dodgers have been scuffling. They've been 3-7 in their last 10 games. However, at home, they are a very tough team. They are 20-10. And offensively, they have a team 789 OPS. That's 4th in Major League Baseball. That's a top 5 unit. And they hit better at home. At home, the team is hitting an 823 team OPS, a 346 on base percentage, and slugging 477. That is very impressive. What's not impressive is the pitching. And this has been a big problem, especially if you follow anyone that covers the Los Angeles Dodgers on social media. They have a staff ERA of 4.49. That is 22nd in Major League Baseball, 1 spot ahead of the Chicago White Sox. The starters have an ERA of 4.29. That's 16th in Major League Baseball, so right in the middle of the road. The bullpen, a 4.76 ERA. That's 27th in Major League Baseball. That's 1 spot behind the Chicago White Sox bullpen, which thanks to their better outings since May 1st, except for this weekend, they ranked 26th in Major League Baseball. Your probable pitchers for this series: Tuesday, it's going to be Lance Lynn against Tony Gonsolin. Wednesday, it's Mike Clevenger against Clayton Kershaw. And Thursday, it's Dylan Cease against Michael Grove. All of these are late games for those in the Central Time Zone. They're all going to be at 9:10 p.m. Central Time. So, Jim, the Dodgers pitching on paper, results-wise, is getting similar output as the Chicago White Sox when looking at the overall season. But the Dodgers are a good example of what it looks like for something that you have always said, more bats and spots, and how an offense, a good offense, can help overcome pitching shortfalls.
That's the dream, isn't it? To be the Dodgers when it comes to just the ability to either acquiring players like trading for Mookie Betts, acquiring Freddie Freeman, paying top dollar or top prospect currency for top players, or like in a case like Max Muncy, finding a guy like Max Muncy and Will Smith. White Sox could have theoretically drafted him, but he fell to the end of the first round, I think, that year. And was that the Zach Collins year? Was that?
Yep, Zach Collins. I think. Let me look it up. My instincts say that Will Smith was drafted ahead of Zach Birdie, but I want to double check that.
Okay. But and then, they dust off guys like Trace Thompson to be somewhat useful. Jason Hayward's had some moments like they're able to get just bursts from guys. I think the Yankees are the same way. Like the Yankees find randos to help them get by. So basically, like, because of their player development and their massive front office, like their front office might be, or like their player development side might be bigger than the entire White Sox front office. I think you mentioned that in the playback. Like the Rays are the same way. Like you look at everybody in their player development, it's scroll, managers upon coordinators upon scouts and analysts and so forth. And just, they put that brain power to good use in terms of just finding depth. And when you think that there's going to be an emergency, Chris Taylor not performing, Gavin Lux getting hurt, like they get by. And right now I think they're scrambling a little bit on the pitching side, but they had Bobby Miller step up. He's been good. So like they're figuring it out. I think that, Noah Syndergaard set him back a little bit. Dustin May got hurt and messed with some plans a little bit, but they have the resourcefulness and they have like prospects to trade because they're so great at developing prospects from, later rounds and from the international market to keep supplementing their current, their 26-man roster. Like the whole idea of the pipeline of talent. And when the White Sox prospect rankings took a hit because they graduated all those players, like the Dodgers graduate players as well, or they trade them. And yet they never bottom out farm wise like the White Sox did, just because they're so good at identifying talent and helping them along because they have the resources to do that in non-playing personnel. So that is the dream, and it's a dream that is the pipe dream, I think, when it comes to just how much the Dodgers invest in their non-playing personnel that the White Sox just have no appetite for or no imagination for, and that's kind of why the Rays are able to compete despite not having Dodgers resources, and the White Sox, while having in between Rays and Dodgers resources financially, are stuck in purgatory, just looking like neither team and being pretty much thoroughly mediocre.
Fact checking myself. No, Zach Birdie was actually drafted ahead of Will Smith in the 2016 Major League Baseball draft. Both the Dodgers and White Sox had 2 first-round picks. The White Sox first-round picks were Zach Collins and Zach Birdie. Neither are with the organization. The Dodgers first-round picks were Gavin Lux and Will Smith, very much involved in their organization. So another great example.
I think Lux was Lux taken before Birdie? Yes. Yep. Because Lux was tied for the White Sox. I remember there was some talk about like the White Sox being interested in him and thinking like, well, if they get the college bat at the first pick, maybe a prep player would be good the second pick. And then he got picked and well, so much for that.
Yeah, they had Lux work out with them at Gary T. Ray Field a week before the Major League Baseball draft. And yeah, they went with Zach Collins. Fun times 7 years ago with the MLB draft. You mentioned Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. Both of those players, to circle back, when we talked about Marcus Semien being one of the 7 position players that have already reached the 3-WAR milestone at Fangraphs. Freeman and Betts are there. And Freddie Freeman, man, when he won the MVP in 2020, we talked about it, just how rare it was for first basemen in both the American and National Leagues to win the MVP awards. Abreu obviously won it with the White Sox in the American League. Freeman won it with the Atlanta Braves, the National League, because it's so hard for first basemen being at a disadvantage defensively to compete against the middle of the position players, the shortstops, the center fielders, maybe even catchers, to get that defensive boost. With so many writers now using wins above replacement, using WAR to influence their voting when they are selecting their most valuable players. But here we are, and Freddie Freeman at 65 games this year has a 3.1 WAR, and that is tied with Wander Franco for the second best in Major League Baseball, behind Ronald Acuna Jr. by 1/10 of a point. So Freddie Freeman here is in the National League MVP conversation, and so is Mookie Betts, because Mookie Betts is at a 3 WAR. So the White Sox here are going to trot out Lance Lynn, which
again, and lefties. So Freddie Freeman being a lefty.
And then Wednesday, Mike Clevenger has been pitching a lot better than I was expecting this year. So for you Clevenger fanboys, I will give you a little bit here that he has been pitching better than I was expecting. But this is what the White Sox are trying it out against two of the National League MVP contenders right now. How are the White Sox going to try to slow down Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts in this series, Jim?
I don't know, especially since Clevenger, he has lefty problems as well. And when you look at, Freeman and Muncy and even James Outman to a certain degree, just the power that they can produce against right-handed pitching does scare me a little bit. So, it seems like an uphill battle. And Lynn, I think is the bigger question, because Mike Clevenger has been meeting back end of rotation expectations. He has flaws as a pitcher, speaking purely as a pitcher, but sign a guy for 1 year and $12 million, like the Dodgers signed Syndergaard for a similar role, and he looks busted. So, there are some landmines when you're shopping in that area of the free agent marketplace, and the White Sox, I think it's fair to say, they've come out okay. Even if Clevenger fades quickly, what do you expect? He gave him a couple good months, and that was more than I was expecting. I thought, between health and just whether he'd come back all the way from his arm and knee problems, I thought I'd be lucky if he got a good April. So there's that. But just when you have the deep lineups, and that's a big part of it, is just how deep their lineup is, how good they are at drawing walks, third in the National League and OBP. Having seen so many first pitch outs and first pitch swings against the Marlins, and seeing two identical offenses basically when it comes to the White Sox and Marlins, ground ball heavy, don't draw a lot of walks, don't hit many homers until the Marlins hit 4 of them on Sunday. Going from that, I think, to the Dodgers offense with that name brand talent, with those really dangerous lefty bats against pitchers who can be eaten alive by lefties. This is going to be I think this will be when it feels like the schedule toughens up. It didn't feel like that, obviously against Detroit. The Yankees, the White Sox caught them when they were down. The Marlins are feisty, but also a little bit short when it comes to just proven talent and why they didn't project well, even though they have some, a fair amount of interesting players who I think are finally coming into their own this year. But now the Dodgers, they have that talent. And while they're facing Michael Grove in the finale, the pitching assignments are not easy for the first 2 games. And we've seen the White Sox struggle against guys they've never seen before too. And Michael Grove is one of those. So it's not, none of this is easy. And if you can get their bullpen, maybe you have a chance, but can the White Sox get to their bullpen with how quickly they can be retired over the first 6 innings? This might be the series where it feels tough. And fortunately, they have a game where they have a day to recover. They have the off day on Monday, so they can try to restore their bullpen arms and get all their relievers in order, because with Lynn and Clevenger, they're probably going to need them I think Lynn seems guaranteed to go 5 innings no matter what, but this will be a case where quicker hooks might be necessary, whether because the offense just blasts through them so quickly, or because they are actually in a game they can win against a team that they aren't probable to beat, so may as well try to pull out some stops.
And I think some people are going to try to paint this picture that this is the best performing pitching staff in Major League Baseball the past month in the White Sox against a very dangerous offense of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And to that point, that is true. The White Sox pitching staff has been one of the better performing pitching staffs in Major League Baseball the past month. The past month has included a lot of games against the American League Central, which we talked about and how poor the offenses are throughout the division, and a Yankees series that the White Sox did not have to face Aaron Judge. So the White Sox have been a little bit lucky here. They're not going to be so lucky against the Dodgers. So let's really see on how the White Sox pitching staff handles Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts. Freddie Freeman already has 24 doubles in the season, Jim. He's on pace to have 59 doubles.
Yeah, he's going to be like, he's got a sneaky Hall of Fame case. Like, he's coming up on 2,000 hits.
He's already over 50 WAR. He has an MVP award, even though it's a shortened season. He's got over 300 home runs. I wonder how long he could. I wonder how long he could do this for. Like, if he gets to 400 home runs, is he in? I mean, he hasn't reached 34 yet. He's 33 years old. He turns 34 in September. If he could do this until he's 37, and yeah, I don't know if he's going to get to 400 home runs. Get a first baseman in today's environment make the Hall of Fame not hitting 400 plus home runs?
It'll be tough, but I think, with the electorate changing and being more aware of like both wins above replacement and also like how to adjust for that, if a first baseman is capped in like how much of that he can accrue just based on positional difficulties. Like, homers aren't quite there, but led the league in double 3 times, and this would be a 4th if he holds on the lead here. Runs scored. He's led the league in runs scored 3 times. Like, he has a lot of black ink. It's not in normal first baseman departments, but it's there. And just, he's got the Harold Baines case in terms of just like, you look at the OPS plus, just solid triple digits all the way down. It's like wins above replacement ever since like his 3rd full season, never below 3. Like, he's never had a bad season since he's been like established in the league. So it's just a wall of stats, which I think if like you mentioned, if he gets past 35, 36 into 37, like he might get there, especially if he can add a little bit more to his postseason credentials as well.
In the last 5 seasons, Freddie Freeman has only missed 12 games. I'm sorry, in the last 6 seasons, Freddie Freeman has only missed 12 games. From 2018 to 2023, 2018, 162 games, 2019, 158 games, so he missed 4. 2020, he played all 60 games. 2021 and 2022, he played 159 games. So that's a combined total of 6 games that he missed, so that's 10. And he's played 65 of the 67 games for the Dodgers in 2023, 12. In his last, from 2018 to 2023, in 6 seasons, he has only missed 12 games.
Yeah,
that's incredible, Joe.
Yeah, he's got the intangible arguments on the side in terms of like character. I think no marks against him there. Leadership, well regarded in that regard. Postseason, like, he doesn't really even need to add postseason credentials, because looking it up, because I know he had a good run when the Braves won it all. But yeah, 7 years, 46 postseason games, 947 OPS. So basically, he's produced, especially at 2021. Like, he helped drive that team. Eddie Rosario had a lot to say about it as well. But like, Freeman was all 3 series he was there. So just like, he needs to keep going because of the first baseman penalty, but few more years, like, he's probably there, especially like past 2,500 hits with the amount of walks he draws, getting on base, running the base as well. Like, he's a stolen base threat. Like, he does a lot of things that the normal first baseman that need to hit 500 homers don't really do.
I would have to say if he gets a 60 career WAR, he's in.
Yeah, kind of like Todd Helton. I guess we'll find out. Todd Helton will kind of pave the way for him, I think.
Good call.
Because Helton finished with 369. Obviously, Coors, he's a 300, 400, 500 guy, and those guys typically always make it. But I think they're kind of similar in terms of like not the prototypical 40 homer first baseman, but just did everything you'd want a first baseman to do.
And we get a chance to watch Freddie Freeman a lot in the upcoming series. Again, that's Tuesday that those games start, and they're all night games starting at 9:10 p.m. Central Time between the White Sox and the Dodgers. So we'll see how that series goes, and we'll obviously be recapping that series as well. We may do something special with Sox Machine Live. We'll let you guys know as well, because Jim and I don't want to be doing a live stream at 12:30 at night, or 12:30 in the morning, I should say. We can if that's what you guys really want, but we may do something special perhaps on Friday night as maybe an idea that I have is like a pregame show heading into that Mariners game, in which that's also going to be another 9:10 p.m. Central Time. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all 9 o'clock games for those that are trying to stay up. And if you can't stay up, don't worry. We will have White Sox wake-up calls for you guys to recap that action in case if you do miss out. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Apple and Spotify Music. We also upload our podcast episodes into our YouTube channel, which you can check out at youtube.com/SoxMachine. If you do watch our videos there, please subscribe to our channel. We'll greatly appreciate it. If you enjoy work and want more, you get more by becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content. And on that front, Jim, I believe you are going to be having another P.O. Sox mailbag coming up.
Yep, just opened the mailbag tonight, Sunday night. So if you didn't see the email, check the Patreon page. Send me your questions.
And our Patreon supporters also get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. And when we have new Sox Machine swag at the Sox Machine store, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball, a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
Do you look awful in regular shorts? That's because they're made of a stiff cotton. They're literally not made to move at all. This means a baggy, boxy, unflattering cut on every leg. Bird Dog Shorts fixed all that. They invented Cloud Knit khaki fabric. It looks just like khaki, but it stretches. You get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. You never thought shorts could look this good. Go to birddogs.com/pool and grab a pair before they sell out for the summer. They'll even throw in a free Yeti-style tumbler. That's birddogs.com/pool.